Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today's episode is going to be a Commander quick take. On episodes like these, I give you my initial take on a newly spoiled Commander from an upcoming set. I'm going to be talking about a potential direction to take that Commander and possible cards used for that build. This show and episodes like this one are possible because of viewers like you. So if you're looking for some easy ways to help support the show, make sure you like this episode and share it with friends. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Thank you to everyone who's already purchased our merchandise, it really does help support the channel. Another easy way to support this channel is by using our TCG Player affiliate links. So make sure that you're looking for those links in the description whenever you're buying a deck or just individual cards. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. But before we really jump into this, I just want to give a quick disclaimer. On episodes like these, they are just initial quick takes. This Commander is just as new to me as it is to you. And because of that, I don't have a finalized deck build for this Commander yet. So the direction that I choose to take this Commander today might not be the same one that I do in a deck tech. And because of that, some of the cards I'm going to mention might not be in that deck either. Alright, now that we're on the same page, let's get into it. Today's Commander quick take is on Gerrard, Weatherlight Hero. Gerrard is a 3/3 human soldier with first strike that costs 2 red white. When he dies, exile it and return to the battlefield all artifact and creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Like Feather, this is another Commander that gets me really excited about the direction of Boros. Historically, many people believe that Boros has been the weakest color combination Commander. In Commander, generating card advantage and ramp are two of the most important things. Unfortunately for Boros, neither of its colors excel at either of those. So in the past, many Boros Commanders have been very focused on combat. But Feather was the first Boros Commander that was really effective at generating card advantage. Feather went about that in a very different way that was very unique to Boros. Gerrard also generates card advantage, again in a very unique way. Nowhere on this card does it say draw a card, but believe me, with this deck you're going to be drawing a ton. There are definitely plenty of directions that you can take this Commander. At a base level, it's essentially a very good piece of board wipe protection. But like many people, the very first thing that I thought of when I saw this new Commander was Eggs. Now, Eggs has been a deck that's been around in many different forms, played in different formats. Essentially, the deck works around a lot of cheap artifact cantrips. These cantripping artifacts generally replace themselves when you sacrifice them or when they enter the battlefield. Then you use cards like Second Sunrise that get back all of your artifacts at once. This is essentially exactly what Gerrard does. When he dies, you exile him and you get your artifacts right back. Now, keep in mind that he doesn't make the artifacts come back into play tapped, so we can use them right away. And although we should exile, we're going to find ways to get around that so we can really abuse this. This deck is going to be a cheap artifact deck that's low to the ground and is going to combo off. This is a fun new direction for Boros and one that we really haven't seen yet. So now it's time to go through some cards to consider for this strategy. So like I mentioned before, we want as many eggs as possible in this deck. Again, eggs are essentially cheap artifacts that cantrip like Chromatic Sphere. It only costs 1 and we can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, and then we draw a card. As soon as we get this in play, this is just free card draw for us. Since our Commander can keep bringing it back, this is going to draw us a ton of cards throughout the game. Now there are plenty of other eggs like this one that we can include in the deck. Some draw when they enter the battlefield, others when they're sacrificed, and others when they hit the graveyard. Regardless, all of them are going to be very effective with Gerrard. We're also going to be running plenty of mana rocks with this deck. We'll get to the combo later, but essentially the more mana that we have, the better. The quicker we can cast things and the easier it is for us to recast Gerrard if we have to. And a cantripping mana rock like a Rosca Relic can be especially effective in this deck. It costs 3 and only taps for 1 mana, so that's not a great rate. But if we have the City's Blessing, we can sacrifice it to gain 3 life and draw a card. Once we're comboing off, essentially this card can generate us infinite mana, gain us a ton of life, and draw us our entire deck. We're also going to be running some mana rocks that don't cantrip though, like Heart of Ramos. It costs 3 and it can tap for a red, but we can also sacrifice it for 1 more red. Again, with our Commander, this can essentially be a much better version of Worn Power Stone. One of my favorite things about artifact decks like these that you can really utilize some underplayed cards. A card like Heart of Ramos might not see too much play, but it's extremely effective in this deck. Now, outside of generating mana and drawing cards, we also want to be dealing damage with our artifacts too. Now, we want to be doing this for 2 reasons. First off, we need to make sure that we can kill Gerrard. Now, we're definitely going to be running ways to sacrifice him, but we can also just deal him damage if we need to. On top of that, once we combo off, we can just kill our opponents with these damage sources. Pyrite Spellbomb might seem very innocuous at first, but it does pretty much everything we want to do in this deck. It's a very cheap artifact that can cantrip, but we can also use it to deal damage. So if we need to draw some cards, we can. If we need to put some damage on Gerrard, we can do that too. And if we're already set up, we can use it to finish off our opponents. A newer card from M20 that comes in really handy with this deck is Mask of Immolation. It's an equipment, and when it comes into play, we create a 1/1 red elemental creature token, and then it gets attached to it. The equipped creature has sacrificed this creature, it deals 1 damage to any target, and its equip cost is just 2. So if we need to sacrifice Gerrard, we can just equip this for 2. And while we're comboing off, this essentially creates infinite elementals that we can sacrifice for damage to ping our opponents down. Again, we're going to be running more ways than this to get rid of Gerrard, as well as our artifacts too. But we're also going to be running ways to get crucial pieces back like Codex Shredder. By paying 5 to tap and sacrifice it, we can return target card from our graveyard back to our hand. Being a combo deck, there are some key pieces that this deck can absolutely not function without. Now we have different variations of those pieces, but again there are only so many. But let's go through some of them now to get a better idea of how this all works. So first up we've got Sigil the New Dawn. It says whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a white. If you do, return that card to your hand. Now you'll have to forgive me in advance because I'm definitely not a judge. I've looked into this and these interactions should work in the way that I explained them. But again, I'm not a judge, so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to articulate this as well as I'd like to. So bear with me, and here we go. So when Gerrard Weatherlight Hero dies, he's supposed to be exiled. His trigger is still going to happen whether he's exiled or not though. So even though he's supposed to be exiled, you can still bring him back with Sigil the New Dawn by paying that 1 and a white. He's going to go back to your hand and your artifacts and creatures will come right back to the battlefield. Now that's already pretty good, but to truly combo, you need some other pieces to make it work. First off, you need to keep producing 6 mana to do this over and over again. So essentially you need some mana rocks that are going to tap for that mana. And at least 2 of that mana needs to be white and 1 needs to be red, because you have to keep recasting your commander and reactivating Sigil the New Dawn. Now some of the mana rocks, like the ones we mentioned earlier, can sacrifice themselves, but others you need a sacrifice outlet for, and we can go through those later. Now if your mana rocks can produce more than 6 mana, you've got infinite mana, but you don't necessarily need that to win. If you've got a cantripping artifact, you can essentially draw your entire deck, and if you've got an artifact that can ping your opponents, you win. But an even more effective combo piece for this deck is Salvager of Ruin. It says sacrifice Salvager of Ruin, choose target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, return it to your hand. Again, Gerrard's trigger happens when he dies and he isn't required to be exiled for it to happen. So when his trigger happens but before he's exiled, you can bring him back with Salvager of Ruin. Salvager of Ruin is going to bring him back to your hand and it's going to be in your graveyard before Gerrard's trigger happens. Gerrard's trigger goes off and Salvager of Ruin and all of your other artifacts and creatures come right back into play. So essentially this is the exact same combo as Sigil the New Dawn, but it's even more effective. Salvager of Ruin's ability is free to activate. So because of that, you just have to pay the 4 mana to recast Gerrard from your hand. Now I'm sure there are other cards that can combo with Gerrard in a similar way to these. Regardless of what card you're comboing with though, you need some way to protect it. A card like Face Shield is very cheap and can come in really handy. It says target permanent you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. If your opponents realize what's going on, they're going to try to take out one of your key combo pieces. Cards like Face Shield are very cheap and efficient in protecting them. Now there are definitely plenty of ways to get those combo pieces back, but protecting them ahead of time is more effective. Now for our combos, we want as many duplicate pieces as we can get, but we also need duplication for other areas too. Now this deck revolves around sacrificing our artifacts as well as our commander. We want to make sure that we've got plenty of ways to do that, especially for the artifacts that don't sacrifice themselves. And generally it's easier for us to sacrifice our commander than trying to deal it damage. So we're going to be running something like Makeshift Munitions. By paying 1, we can sacrifice an artifact or a creature and it deals 1 damage to our creature or player. So we can use this as a very cheap sacrifice outlet for our commander or our artifacts, and it can also be a win condition too. Now unless all your mana rocks are tapping for more than 1 mana, most likely you need a sacrifice outlet for artifacts that's free. Rusted Slasher has sacrifice an artifact, regenerate Rusted Slasher. This is a good outlet because it's free and it protects itself. But the best outlet is probably Krark Clan Ironworks. It lets you sacrifice an artifact to add 2 mana to your mana pool. With the right setup, this can really help you go off pretty easily. Like I mentioned before, with a deck like this, you can really find some cards that aren't finding use in a lot of other decks. Because of that, many of these cards are very cheap and can make a very effective budget deck. But as always with a budget, there are ways to improve on the deck. So now let's look at some potential upgrades to consider. On this channel, to be considered a reasonable upgrade, these cards have to be $10 or less. So although some cards might be perfect for this commander, if they're over $10, they're not going to show up here. The first upgrade that I would look to add to this deck is Inventor's Fair. By paying 4, you can tap and sacrifice it to search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Now you can only activate this if you control 3 or more artifacts, but that's no problem in this deck. Having a land that can tutor for one of your combo pieces is huge, and if you already have your combo pieces together, go get a finisher. This card is very flexible and just takes up a land slot. And then there's Kodotha Forge Master, which is another tutor to consider. It has tap, sacrifice 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact card, and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So not only can this card sacrifice artifacts, but it can also go get you that combo piece that you need. Keep in mind though that this doesn't have haste, but it can still be very effective in this deck. Like I mentioned before, you also want as many egg pieces as you can possibly get. So even just upgrading this deck with Chromatic Star is very effective. It has pay 1 and tap and sacrifice to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and when it's put into a graveyard from play, you draw a card. This may just be another egg, but again, the more eggs that you have, the more consistent your deck's going to be. Now that we've looked at the cards to consider, as well as potential upgrades, let's look at some similar commanders. I find that looking at other current commanders can be a great place to get ideas for a new one. First up, we've got Brea Ethereum Shaper, which can be a fantastic 4-color eggs commander. She pretty much does everything. She makes artifacts, can sacrifice them, can deal damage, can take out creatures, and can gain you life. There's plenty that you can learn and apply by looking at a Brea eggs deck. Another commander that you can learn from is Urza. He can utilize a ton of cheap artifacts to generate a ton of mana. So when you look at an Urza deck, you can probably find a bunch of cheap artifact options here. Next up, there's Gerrard, Weatherlight Captain. She has whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Now, in a lot of decks built around her, she can combo off by storming. She casts a bunch of cheap artifacts over and over again and draws a ton of cards. But again, there are plenty of hidden artifact gems in those decks too. Another commander that benefits from a ton of cheap artifacts is Sahili the Gifted. She can utilize those artifacts to reduce the cost of huge spells. And finally, even Shu Yun can be a fantastic egg-style commander. Because it's in Jeskai, it has probably the best colors for artifact synergies. You can use some effective spells to cast and recur a ton of artifacts and pump Shu Yun. Regardless, there's always a lot that you can learn from looking at other decks. Gerrard is a very unique commander though, and I'm really excited to see how people build with him. But now I want to know what your thoughts on my quick take are, so why don't you let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't seen it yet, make sure you check out my last commander quick take here. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Links to our social media accounts can be found in the description. Also in the description below is a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. I truly couldn't do this without all of your support, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, check out some of our other episodes on budget deck techs, Quest for Quarters episodes, commander topics, and creators' quarters. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again, and have a good one.